Again, my name is David Paquette. I'm a product marketing manager at Zerto. We're a Hewlett Packard Enterprise company. And today our webinar is, do you love your DR? And first, let me say that I love you all for attending today. And if you happen to be watching this on a recording later on, much love to you as well. Yesterday was a Valentine's Day. I understand that's probably primarily celebrated in the United States, but if you happen to celebrate that, I hope you had a wonderful time celebrating it. I know I did. I took my wife out to dinner to her favorite Greek restaurant, and we had a lovely time. So I hope you all got to experience that as well as you could. But the first thing I want to talk about today is not so much the things that are great about love, but I'd like to talk a little bit about what I call these disaster recovery heartbreakers. So, these are just a few of the things I was thinking about in terms of what, we may not like about disaster recovery events or the solutions that we have in place and what they do for us when the time comes that they're needed. And some of those things that I thought of were, just simply having a recovery point objective or even a recovery time objective that's measured in hours or days. So when a disruption happens, whether it's a natural disaster or a cyber attack, whatever, you're going to have the ability to recover the data and then get those services back up online. If that's going to take a matter of hours or days, that's going to be a heartbreaking experience. Similarly, if you have to go through a lot of manual steps, that's only going to slow down the process and introduce the ability for human errors. It's going to even further lengthen the process. Another thing that we hate about disaster recovery is disruptive DR testing. If you have to take your systems offline and cause a disruption in order to test your DR scenario, that makes it very hard to actually perform those tests. And an untested DR solution is hardly a DR solution. If you're not sure that you're going to be able to recover, that's tough. If you have a lot of agents to manage, it certainly makes that solution very difficult to not only to manage on a day-to-day basis, but also to scale out when you do need to grow your environment. Being restricted to a single platform with a DR solution can be another issue if you're scaling out, particularly if you want to, go into the cloud as part of your cloud strategy, and your DR solution may or may not support, the cloud that you would like to move to. Vendor lock-in, if your DR solution forces you to use a specific, hardware or storage vendors, that can really lock you into that. And then, where it gets really personal is, being or having to miss out on, your data, the things that you want to do in life, whether that's a vacation that you wanted to take that gets interrupted by a disruption, or, missing your child's recital or, a sporting event because you had to come into the office to deal with the disruption in your DR solution. All of those things, are the things that we want to try to avoid when we're looking at DR solutions. Now, you may recognize this if you've ever seen a Zerto presentation before. These are the top challenges that we typically hear from our customers. These are cyber threats, disruptions, and cloud complexity. And of course, our goal is to try to provide 24/7 availability despite these challenges that our customers are facing. But I want to break these down a little bit further and talk about some of the more specifics. Let's start with cyber threats. With cyber threats, cyber attacks go beyond your typical disruptions, right? A natural disaster, for example, is going to maybe flood your data center or catch it on fire, or maybe just cut the power for some period of time. But a cyber attacker will intentionally try to go after your ability to recover. They will target backups and recovery data. They will do their best to prevent you from recovery. They go far beyond what any other type of disruption does, because they are specifically trying to prevent you from recovering. And because they are introducing malware, and because they have perhaps started to silently attack your data before you realize it's happening. Many of your recovery points that you would normally go to recover data may be unclean because malware exists in them, or they've already encrypted data at that point. So you cannot recover from those recovery points cleanly. And one of the final points I want to make there about them going beyond the typical disruptions is that even if you pay the ransom, it doesn't necessarily guarantee a recovery from data. And many people who do end up paying a ransom are just hit again because now the attackers know that they are willing to pay a ransom to get their data recovered. So not only are you not guaranteeing recovery, but you are encouraging the attackers to hit you again and again if you do pay the ransom. Another aspect of cyber threats is that regulations are tightening because of cyber threats. There are more regulations being put in place. The existing regulations are being updated to try to account for cyber attacks. And this goes beyond just regulations that are being put forward by state and federal governments, but these are being also introduced into industry standards that are in place for specific industries. And even when it comes to getting cyber insurance to protect yourself against these attacks, these cyber insurance are increasingly requiring more stringent proof of recovery. It's not just a matter of saying that you have a recovery solution in place to recover from a cyber attack. It's more that you have to prove that you do indeed have the ability to recover from a cyber attack. So that's one of the many challenges that our customers are facing. And so what would you like to have in place in order to, have a DR solution that can handle these cyber attacks and help you with that cyber recovery when the time comes? Well, since it was Valentine's Day yesterday, I decided to do this sort of in the form of Valentine's, right? So what do you love about your cyber recovery solution? So does it have all of these things? You can think of this as counting the ways that you love your cyber recovery solution. And when I say cyber recovery solution, I mean really your disaster recovery solution, which is helping you recover from those cyber attacks. And since attackers are going after those the recovery data in those disaster recovery solutions, you need to have a lot of these features to be able to protect yourself and to be in compliance with a lot of the new regulations that are coming down. So having immutability, air gapping, real-time detection. A lot of solutions that are out there now are more based upon backup technologies, and they have the ability to detect, malicious behavior. But that's only after a backup is completed, and then they have time to scan the backup. If you really want a disaster recovery response to one of these events, you need to be detecting an attack in real time as data is being affected by it. Of course, being able to test that recovery to prove that you can indeed recover is very important. And then lowering your recovery point objective and lowering your recovery target objective is very important as well. As you saw on the previous slide, hopefully, the average is 1 month to recover from a ransomware attack or a cyber attack. You also need the ability to recover into a clean room, and a lot of these things combined together can, form a vault architecture, which kind of gives you the ultimate protection against a cyber attack with the ability to recover. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I wanted to go ahead and move on to the next challenge, which was disruptions. Now, disruptions you can really divide into two categories here. Downtime, which is your systems being offline, no one being able to access either the applications or the data behind them, and then data loss. Now with downtime, sort of regardless of whether you're a 24/7 business or you're more of like following more banking hours, perhaps from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily, the downtime is still unacceptable, particularly during those operating hours, right? If you're more along the lines of banking hours, you may be able to tolerate planned downtime, after hours, but downtime during those operating hours is going to come with a high cost to you. And those downtime costs can, include loss of revenue, loss of productivity, and damage to your brand or your brand reputation. And the recovery times that are available from, the various recovery solutions out there right now can really vary, between minutes all the way up to days, depending on how long it takes to recover that data. Now, data loss is the other side of the coin. A lot of times when a disruption occurs and you don't have access to your data, the first question is how old, is the last backup? What is the last known recovery point that we can go to? And, with a lot of solutions, that recovery point is going to be, hours old or even perhaps a day old, depending on your backup strategy. Data loss, can cost you similarly to downtime in terms of lost productivity. It could also cost you, though, lost intellectual property, and it can result in violation of regulations because that data can be protected by those regulations. So if you don't have the abilities to recover that data, that can cause a lot of problems for you. All that data that you've been, everyone has been generating within your organization, for the last several hours that you may lose in one of these disruptions, can result in a large loss in terms of, what you produced and, the ability to have to go back and reproduce that data. And loss of data can really be, directly related to downtime. If you don't have access to your data, that may mean that the applications that you are running really are not functioning anymore. If they don't have the data behind them to provide the services that you're trying to provide. So data loss can come in many different forms, including causing the downtime that we just talked about. So what are sort of the things that we love about DR solutions that we want to make sure that we have, in our back pocket? Again, the same format as before, we want to talk about things like automation and orchestration, because when the time comes to recover that data, you want to have automation in place to eliminate manual steps, and you want to have orchestration in place so that you can recover many different workloads, whether they be data sets, applications, virtual machines, entire sites, all within a short amount of time. You want to have, thousands of recovery points to be able to recover from, because you need the flexibility of being able to choose a recovery point that is a good recovery point. The most recent recovery points may not be the most viable because depending on the nature of disruption, data could be corrupted in those recovery points. So you really need the ability to go back, and have those thousands of recovery points to ensure that you can recover with the most amount of data, at the cleanest, most recent available point. And that having those recovery points gives you that option. And then, of course, you want to be able to test non-disruptively. We talked about disruptive testing. No one wants to do that. But if you can test non-disruptively where it does not impact your production, then you can test often and make sure that your recovery solution is going to be good to recover from at any point in time. And of course, you want to get that low recovery point objective and recovery time objective. Cyber attacks will try to, make that as difficult as possible, and it can take a long time. But if it's not a cyber attack, you may be able to recover literally within minutes with almost no data loss if you have the right solution in place. And then, of course, application-centric recovery gives you the ability to bring those applications back up as quickly as possible because it's coordinating the recovery of all the parts of that application. And then one-to-many gives you the ability to protect, to multiple sites, so that even in some of the more worst-case scenarios, you have more than one copy of that data to go to recover from. And then finally, we wanted to talk about the cloud complexity. This is the third big challenge that we hear about from our customers. And all organizations now are going to various types of cloud strategies. Many of them are going to multiple clouds. Most organizations, I believe, according to some of the reports I've seen, are using more than one cloud platform as part of their cloud strategy. And many are using hybrid cloud architectures which span both across on-premises and in clouds, whether those clouds are hosted by MSPs or they're public clouds. And then, DR can be, in any combination of those, whether it's to the cloud, within the cloud, or between clouds, or even back from the cloud to on-premises. Multi-platform is another important part of this. You may have multiple hypervisors in your on-premises environment, but even if not, there are multiple different native cloud infrastructure as a service platforms with all the public cloud options that are available. And you can also have a combination of both on-premises, VMware in cloud, and those native cloud infrastructure as a service platforms. All of those, complicate the ability to have a solution that can go across, the entire breadth of your environment. So again, what you really want to have is a DR solution that you can love, that is going to help you get in and provide the DR that you need for these complex scenarios. And what does that look like? It looks like having multiple platform support, multiple cloud support, support for those native cloud infrastructure as a service platforms, the ability to do in-cloud disaster recovery, the ability to have those low RPOs and RTOs, again, the least amount of data loss and the least amount of downtime, and then being able to support those hybrid cloud architectures, whether it's on-prem or across multiple clouds, and that cloud to cloud disaster recovery when you're going between public or MSP clouds. All right, so that was more or less the love fest I want to talk about at the beginning of this. Just the things that we really should be loving about our disaster recovery solution. So now I want to sort of switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit more about the focus of what we're trying to provide. And really what we want to see is that every industry, like all these things I talked about, really go across every industry, whether it is so you can see some of these examples here. Like normally I would put this up here and say, oh, look at all these great customers that trust Zerto, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what I want to talk about here. What I want to talk about is the breadth of the different industries that need disaster recovery and implement disaster recovery solutions to make sure that their businesses stay online. And it really goes across from health services to manufacturing to retail, transportation, energy, communications, really any industry, and really any size industry. I talked before about a 24/7 business model versus a business model that may be more focused on those banking hours during the day. Either case, everyone needs a DR solution that can keep them online during those operating hours. And so from Zerto's standpoint, we approach this as providing continuous availability from edge to cloud. And that means providing disaster recovery, ransomware resilience, and the multi-cloud mobility that you need to handle all of these challenges. And we do that based on a platform of continuous data protection. And you can see just a few examples of the platforms that we support down there at the bottom of this slide. So I just want to jump straight into talking about disaster recovery here, since that is what we're really talking about in loving your disaster recovery solution. So Zerto has been a leader in disaster recovery since 2011. We do that with a software-only hypervisor-based replication solution, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that works. But really, we're focused on getting those RPOs down to seconds and RTOs down to minutes. So the ability to recover with the least amount of data loss and as quickly as possible from any disruption. I'll even talk about how that applies to those cyber scenarios that we were talking about. So we also do that by using a lot of orchestration for our recovery processes, whether they be the failover and failback, or being able to test that recovery with a lot of automation built into that process. So for those of you who have seen a Zerto presentation before, I just want to note that I'm sort of previewing some of our new presentation slides here. So you're kind of getting a sneak preview. So thank you for being here. I hope that you enjoy some of what we have that's new here. So reducing the high cost of data loss and downtime is really what it's all about. And so as you can see here, we have some examples of those backups that we've all relied on that were really the only disaster recovery solution in the beginning before replication became a thing. But then we had some capabilities for replicating within storage, and that reduced the amount of data loss and the amount of downtime because you could do that more quickly than traditional backups. But now what we really want to do is reduce that down, from those hours to either seconds or minutes, and that is where Zerto comes in. That's what our whole impetus is, to provide you the ability to recover, as quickly as possible and to eliminate those disruptions. So we do that with this continuous data protection. What is continuous data protection? Well, it starts with real-time replication, or what we sometimes call near synchronous replication. We're replicating every block as it changes from the production environment to a DR environment. And we do that alongside being able to detect in real time encryption of that data, so that we can look for anomalies in data encryption to try to alert you if a potential cyber attack is occurring within your data sets. Because we're software only, we can do that across any hardware or storage. And it really gives you the ability to replicate that data across any distance. And we don't use any agents. We're not using snapshots. We're not using scheduled replication. We're really replicating it in real time. Now, just the replication alone is not enough. We need to, provide you with those multiple recovery points. If you look at a backup solution is going to struggle when it comes to trying to provide you with a consistent recovery point for an application, because it's going to be backing up different workloads at different times as it's trying to perform those backups. Most backup solutions really have no awareness of specific applications and the ability to coordinate backups between all of those different components so that it gets a consistent checkpoint across all of those components at the same time. It's going to be backing them up, at different points in time during the overall backup process. And so you can really end up there with inconsistent backups and data sets within your application recovery. It really slows down the ability to recover the application and increases the data loss. With Zerto, we allow you to group together all of those parts of an application into what we call a virtual protection group. And then that allows us to coordinate all of those recovery points to be crash consistent across each of those points for that application. So your application can come up at any one of those points with consistency. We have a right order fidelity, which is going across all of the different virtual machines that we're protecting within those virtual protection groups. And it really gives you the ability to recover that application as quickly as possible. I mentioned that orchestration earlier. This is just an example of a failover here. When we are failing over, you can see that there is a virtual protection group here created. Has all of these different virtual machines within that virtual protection group. And then in this case, it's just selecting one of those. You can select, have granularity down to an individual virtual machine or to an entire site. These virtual protection groups can really be configured however you want, whether it is for a specific virtual machine, a application, a department, an entire site. You can do that with these virtual protection groups and have them logically orchestrated however you would like, so that it can speed up your recovery process. And of course, there's all the automation built in, so really it just takes a few clicks and the rest of the process is automated and brings those applications back online for you. And then in most cases, we generate a nice recovery report, even when you're just performing a test, so you can have validation of that process. All right, just an example of how this ability to test has affected our customers. This is one customer who, before Zerto was doing testing over multiple days to perform the same testing that they could do after Zerto with under 2 hours. So a very significant change in their ability to test that data and the ability to do so without any impact to production. Being able to do it within an automated process that took far fewer resources. And this is just an example of some of our customers and the RPOs that they're able to achieve, even at scale across thousands of virtual machines in their environment. This is sort of regardless of whether they're doing this on premises or whether they're going between Zerto on premises and Zerto in one of our public cloud platforms or an MSP cloud platform. They're still able to achieve these very low recovery point objectives, even at scale of thousands of virtual machines. So I want to talk next about ransomware resilience and cyber recovery. That was really the first challenge that we listed here, but it really is tied into all those abilities that I talked about with our continuous data protection and the ability to do disaster recovery. So for cyber resilience specifically, we want to talk about the sort of three categories of how you should approach cyber resilience or cyber recovery. And those are first, replicate and detect, second, isolate and lock, and third, test and recover. What do I mean by these? Well, first of all, for replicate and detect, in our case, I talked about our real-time encryption detection. What we do with that is that when we detect, not only do we alert you when we detect something within the management console, but we flag these checkpoints that we were creating in our recovery journal. So I mentioned before, you want to have thousands of recovery points. We can create these recovery points every few seconds. That's what gives us those low recovery point objectives. And as we're detecting encryption, we will flag these recovery points so that when you go in to the journal to perform a recovery, you can see where the suspicious encryption activity began, which will help you identify when the attack may have begun. And you can choose a recovery point before that suspicious activity began to ensure that you are choosing a recovery point that may very well not have any encrypted data already in it. So then isolating and locking, this is a great diagram here showing our ability not only to be replicating that data in real time between your production environment and your DR target. In this case, it's showing a cloud DR target, but the ability to then also replicate data into what we call a immutable data copy or an extended journal copy, and sometimes we'll call it that, is basically a point in time from the journal that we take as a static copy of data. We make that copy immutable, and we can do that onto cloud storage such as Azure Blobs or Amazon S3, or we can even do it on local storage that is S3 compatible. So we have the ability to create those immutable data copies, which are going to create data copies that are immune to hackers going in and modifying that data. Now, beyond just immutability, there are other features that you want to have within your DR solution to protect it fully against attackers. And those are some of the things that we talked about earlier, such as air gapping and the immutability that we just talked about, but combining those together with isolation and some zero trust principles into a vault architecture. So what that looks like from a Zerto perspective is you have your production site from which you're protecting the data. You're replicating that data in real time to your DR site, or in this case, a landing zone that we've created, which is part of the vault architecture. That vault architecture is really made up of two separate sets of hardware. The first is that landing zone, and this is all built on HPE ProLiant, HPE Alletra, and HPE Aruba networking hardware. So it goes into that landing zone, which is the first part of the vault, and that is operating just as a normal Zerto replication and recovery solution. Disaster recovery, the ability to recover very quickly with almost zero data loss. Now, secondarily, from that landing zone, we are replicating that data using the HPE Alletra storage layer across a dedicated storage link. So these both of these hardware architectures are sitting next to each other within the same data center. So it's using a dedicated storage link to replicate that data from the HPE Alletra in the landing zone into the vault itself. And that is happening independent of the operation of Zerto. It is all being managed from within the vault itself, so there is no external ability to access that vault from any attacker. They cannot see it on the network, and it is only connected via that port-to-port direct connect for the storage. That gives you the ultimate protection within that vault because it is fully air-gapped as far as the attackers are concerned. They have no management capabilities to access anything within that vault. Now, what does that look like from a recovery standpoint? This is where we get into the test and recover phase. In most cyber attack scenarios, you're going to probably not need to rely on the vault. The vault is there for those, devastating scenarios where a vault may be required. So what does that look like? If your production environment gets attacked, then it's infected, files are encrypted, you have the ability to then recover from that replication target. So you can select a clean recovery point from the journal within that replication target or the landing zone, as I called it in the previous slide, and then you can recover that data directly back into that production environment. And then, you should be able to recover, uninfected data back into your production environment from that landing zone. Now, if the landing zone also gets infected, then you can go to the vault. And within the vault, you can have a clean room environment, which I mentioned earlier, where you can bring up your vCenter environment because it's all production grade hardware and storage in there. You can start up Zerto and you can make a recovery from a snapshot within that HPE Alletra storage that you've replicated and be able to recover all the data within that isolated environment. And once you determine that you've recovered the data successfully and cleaned it within that environment, then you can recover it back to production. Okay. So okay on time, I'm not going to take too much longer here, but I just want to hit on a few more points. This is a great example of a customer. This is not involving a vault or anything, but is a customer who had a cyber attack both before using Zerto and after implementing Zerto. And I think both attacks were similar. I think they were hit by CryptoLocker software or ransomware software in both cases. But in the first attack, it took them 2 weeks to recover, and they lost 12 hours worth of data. And when they were hit similarly with a very similar attack after they had implemented Zerto, they were able to recover with only 10 seconds of data loss with a recovery time of only 10 minutes. So they were really able to, change their whole outlook on being attacked and having some data encrypted and not, having a difficult time recovering it with Zerto because of the speed and the ability of Zerto to recover, within seconds of when data was lost. So moving on to multi-cloud mobility and agility, we talked about how complex, the IT environments are getting these days as cloud strategies move forward, and both on-premises and cloud platforms are being combined together into IT environments. With Zerto, we give you a lot of options to protect data, whether it resides on premises, whether you are trying to simply migrate it between on-premises and the cloud. So giving you the flexibility and agility to move it back and forth between those platforms, but also the ability to provide disaster recovery for it at the same time, regardless of where that data lands. So being able to do that between clouds, within the same cloud, if you're going from region to region or availability zone to availability zone, within those clouds, being able to provide, through some of our MSP partners, disaster recovery as a service within those cloud platforms. And then we also have some options for protecting software as a service data, whether it's Microsoft 365, Google, Salesforce, or other software as a service platforms that are out there that your organization may well be using currently, being able to protect the user data that is stored in those applications for your organization. So we really try to provide these options sort of across the board, regardless of how you are implementing cloud and on-premises services into your IT environment. With public cloud in particular, we support not only Zerto for VMware going between on-premises and VMware within these public clouds, whether it will be on Azure or Oracle Cloud or many of these public cloud options that are available. You can sort of seamlessly go between on-premises and cloud or between clouds using VMware because VMware, basically, regardless of where it resides, sort of looks the same and acts the same, whether it's on a cloud or an on-premises environment. Zerto for Azure is where we start having our support for those native infrastructure as a service platforms, so Azure VM. So Azure is a good example of where we support both VMware running on Azure or the native Azure hypervisor, or not hypervisor, but cloud infrastructure as a service platform. So you have all the options of using any of those within Azure, as well as replicating within Azure itself between regions and availability zones. And then we also have Zerto in Cloud for AWS. Again, with AWS, we support the native infrastructure as a service platform, EC2, but we also have specific solutions for orchestrated and agentless DR across those regions and zones within EC2. So lots of options with Zerto for replicating across clouds and within a multi-cloud, multi-platform environment. And then, of course, the multi-site analytics and reporting to go along with all that, whether it's completing an on-premises model where you have multiple sites, or whether cloud is involved. Zerto has analytics that can go across all those sites and give you a global view and provide reports for you to help you stay in compliance. So if you want to experience Zerto for yourself, and you can see a lot of these different scenarios that I just talked about within not only, you could see a demo of a lot of these, but you can see them hands-on for yourself with our hands-on labs. I can highly recommend those. Those are where you can just spin up a lab within a cloud environment very quickly on Zerto's website and play around within that lab with a set of instructions to follow to go through some scenarios. And that gives you a real hands-on experience into a lot of the scenarios I talked about. We can also set you up with a free trial, but really, you can look to some of our existing customers to provide, some real stories to you and their reviews of Zerto and how they've implemented it in their organization to a lot of these, third-party peer review sites. So these are just all the options that you have for looking at Zerto and what we can do and how we can really help you to truly love your DR solution. So let me go ahead and open this up. I'm going to leave this here for a second, but I'm going to go ahead and open up the questions and see if we've got any waiting. Looks like we do have a few. Let's see. I think most of these questions have to do with the me not having presented the slides, so that's okay. At the beginning. All right, so great. So with that, if we do not have any other questions, I see that some of the questions or from people who've already left, and that's fine too. But if you have any other questions, well, we can take a minute to see if you want to enter any of those in. But otherwise, I don't see any coming in. So with that, I think that will say thank you for having attended the webinar. I really appreciate you having been here, and thank you again for your time.